Hey everyone, it's a new week. That means it's time for SysAdmin Weekly. So today's episode, Eric and I sit down and we talk about what's new with Hyper-V in Windows Server 2025. Now, we've been waiting for a lot of these enhancements to Hyper-V for quite a long time, so we're really excited to see them finally make their way into Windows Server. So today we're going to be talking about enhancements like Network ATC, Network HUD. We're going to be talking about GPU partitioning. We're going to talk about dynamic processor compatibility and lots more on today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Hello. Hey, everyone. Welcome to SysAdmin Weekly. This is a Project Run Space podcast, and this podcast is designed for all of those tireless, hardworking sysadmins that are in the trenches day in and day out, pressing buttons, turning knobs, and trying to keep their end users happy, right? And so my name is Andy Syrewicze, your host, and with me is my partner in crime, as always, I've got Eric Siron. How's it going, Eric?
I'm doing all right. How are you, Andy?
Doing good. Can't complain. We are on episode 3 or 4 of the show. I've lost track at this point.
3.
It's been fun so far. I'm looking forward to another episode, and of course today we are focusing on the new Hyper-V features in Windows Server 2025. So excited about that. Before we get started with that, a couple of housekeeping items. As always, you can go back and view previous versions of the show. Like I said, this is episode 3. So we've got a couple of episodes prior to this one. As I mentioned in previous episodes, if you've listened to some of the other ones, we really want this to be a audience interactive type of show, right? So if you have a sysadmin topic that you would love to see us cover or talk about, or you have a question that you want to pose to Eric and I, or you have a comment on a previous episode, or a funny sysadmin joke, whatever, you can send an email to contact@sysadminweekly.com, and that will end up in Eric and I's mailboxes, and we try to get back in a timely fashion, but of course we both have day jobs, right? But we'll get back to you as soon as we can, or we'll address your question, comment, joke here on the show, right? So I think that covers my housekeeping items before we get into the main crux of the episode. Eric, anything you want to add before we dive in here?
No, let's get going. I'm excited on this one.
That's going to be a fun one, and I mean, excuse me, you and I go way back. We've known each other for, I've lost track now, like 10, 12 years now or something
Then the
like that.
12. It's past 12, yeah. I know it's
And
well over
so,
10.
we kind of met each other because of Hyper-V, right? We used to author on the old Altero Software Dojo together. And so we were always writing about Hyper-V, right? And then we did a book or two on Hyper-V, and then I was originally a Hyper-V MVP. I don't remember if you got into the program when the competency areas were still that granular, or if you were
No,
just
I have
a
always
cloud
been
and data
Cloud and
center.
Data Center from the beginning. Yeah, and so I was first awarded in 2017, and it's been Cloud and Data Center since then for me.
Gotcha. I think my first year was 2013. 2013, I was a Hyper-V MVP, and then they kind of generalized the technology areas, right? Anyway, my point being here is that Hyper-V is something that is near and dear to both of our hearts, right? We have a lot of history with Hyper-V, and personally from my side, it's nice to see Hyper-V continue to get great features and updates. We actually did, I think, the first episode of this show. The whole episode was partially an introduction to the show, but we talked about the fact that no, Hyper-V is not dead, right? Now, we won't rehash that whole discussion here. If you want to see that discussion, go back and listen to episode 0. Episode 0, I'll put a link to that in the show notes so you guys can check that out in case you want to. But anyway, what do you think, Eric? Let's talk about what's new, right?
Do it.
So I've got 5 or 6 items on my list here. The first one I want to touch on is enhancements in networking. And networking has always been, I don't know, maybe in my experience, it's probably one of the areas where I've seen the most support questions or troubles with Hyper-V, just because networking is so, it tends to be complicated and complex, right? And so they've added a couple of feature enhancements here and new features in Server 2025 that are some nice quality of life enhancements. The first one I'll mention probably doesn't apply to every single sysadmin out there. That is accelerated networking. Microsoft has made some changes. They have a feature they called ExcelNet, and I'm going to quote one of their blog posts. I'll put a link to this blog post down in the show notes. But I'm quoting here. Accelerated networking simplifies the management of single root I/O virtualization (SRIOV) for virtual machines hosted on Windows Server 2025 clusters. SRIOV provides a high performance data path that bypasses the host. And here's the key parts here, which reduces latency, jitter, and CPU utilization for the most demanding workloads. Unquote. Now, they go on to talk a little bit more about how this is particularly useful for HPC environments, high performance compute. Think of things like high finance organizations that are really chugging on large data sets, things like that, right? Where network latency could potentially be an issue. And so this feature is kind of geared towards those organizations, right? And so Eric, you and I were kind of talking before the show. I was saying this is one of those features that most sysadmins probably won't need, but the ones that need it really need it, right?
Yes,
So
I would agree with that. And there are a lot of people throughout my career, I can tell you the number of people who think they need it greatly exceed the number of people that need it.
true. Very
But
true.
that said, fine if you want it. I don't, we've kind of blasted past the whole thing. Really, what IRV does is it passes the hardware straight to the virtual machine, is
Yep.
really what it's doing.
Yep.
So that there's nothing in between the two. And it's a cool feature. It was very obnoxious to configure.
It was,
And
yes.
and I will go back to the fact that most people who think they need that kind of speed don't. And of the many things I envision on my own tombstone, the one is going to be show me the performance traces. Because I got it, but my network's not fast enough. I'm like, okay, show me your performance traces, and I want to, because I don't want to hear your description. Well, I clicked on something and it took a long time. Like, do you have any idea how much happens? So what makes you so sure your network is slow? What makes you so sure you need this? And, a lot of times, well, I copied an ISO across. Okay, so that sounds like you were just seeing how fast it would go. You don't actually know if you need it to go that fast. I mean, I can tell you, even working in a, multi-thousand user organization, we don't move ISOs around very often, except when we're, it's never, ever performance sensitive. I'll tell you that much. It's if it takes me another 2 minutes to deploy a server, okay, right. So, but going back to there are people who definitely need it. IOV is a pain in the butt to configure. It's nice because it does follow the virtual machine if it live migrates to another host. SRILV will go with it. Everything continues. You do, of course, get the hiccup during the transition. Can't avoid that, but the hiccup, not down.
Yeah, it's brief,
So,
super brief.
yep.
I think the last time I actually watched it, you drop a single ping. That's it.
Yes, and that actually has nothing to do with any of this. That's your network reacting to that was there, now it's here.
Yep.
I gotta go hunt that down. So that's
Got
your
to update the
network.
ARP tables and all that stuff across the network infrastructure.
Yep, yep. So that really has nothing to do with the Hyper-V host at all. So and the thing that we've always told people is it occurs during the TCP timeout window. So you will not lose a single TCP frame,
Yep.
period.
Yep.
You might lose some UDP though, but it's for the same thing as ping, that it's just while the network figures out where it went. So, and what's the gap between pings? Is it a full second?
Oh, I don't remember these days. I know that's
Yeah,
like IPv4 101. I should know this, but
I
it's
should
like
know this, and I see it all the time, and yeah, I don't, and
some
then
of
you
that
put me on the
stuff like you
spot.
just take for granted after a while, you know? Like it's yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, anyway, yeah, I don't know that I've seen a ping drop in a while either. I think, and that has more to do with, again, coming back to network infrastructure. That
Yep. For sure. You know, it's funny, the show me the logs thing. My 15-year-old son, I went through this with him recently. He came to me and he's like, "You know, Dad, when I'm running the new Indiana Jones game on my machine, my memory is really high. I think I need 32 gigs of memory." And I'm like, do you really though? Let's go look, you know? And so I was explaining the concept of memory and disk paging and all of that. And I'm getting perfmon out and, looking up counters. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. Actually, you're paging like a lot. Okay, yes. We have the argument here now for 32 gigs of memory. But, kind of going through that whole process, right? Which
yeah,
it's good. We should
leaves
be
you
going
with a
through that whole
little
process.
egg on your face when he's like, "Well, that's what I said in the beginning." But I can tell you, at least throughout my career, the times that people have self-diagnosed performance problem correctly is very close to zero because
Yep.
they're like,
Agreed.
"Oh, well, I only have a gigabit connection and I know 10 gigabit exists, therefore I need 10 gigabit." And then I'm like, "Cool." And over the last 90 days, you actually look like we should downgrade you to 100 megabit. So probably
Right.
should have kept your mouth shut. Watch me go, "Oh, no, no."
You're one of those sysadmins.
I can
Uh,
be. I can
one of
be.
the
Oh.
one of the punitive sysadmins.
Yes, I would have left you alone if you'd have left me alone, but now you got me involved, so I got to fix something. And looks like you have too much bandwidth, sir.
Uh, anyway, back on the rails here. So we just talked about accelerated networking. I want to talk about network ATC now, and network ATC, fairly new. First kind of showed up in Azure Stack HCI as the first place I saw it surface, but it is now in Windows Server proper and Windows Server 2025 and Azure Local as well. Of course, like we talked about in a previous edition of the show, Azure Stack HCI is now Azure Local, so kind of the same thing there. And again, from that same blog post that, again, I'm throwing the link in the show notes, Network ATC, basically this blog post talks about how historically, right, the configuration of the network was difficult to do, et cetera, right? And where is it here? I wanted to quote this one section here. Here. And I'm quoting the article because it does a really good job of explaining what the goal of Network ATC is. And I quote, Network ATC simplifies the deployment and network configuration management for Windows Server 2025 clusters, provides an intent-based approach to host network deployment, and customers specify one or more intents, management, compute, or storage for a network adapter, and we automate the deployment of the intended configuration. So in the old days, um, I have all the gray hair in my beard now, so I can say that. But in the old days, I remember, I'm sitting in front of, what will be a 4 node cluster. I've got my notepad out and I'm like, okay, this NIC is going to be management. This one's going to be compute. This one's going to be used for storage, right? And I'm actually planning out the cluster networking. Then we have to go configure those NICs how we want them. Network ATC takes all that work off of our hands, right? ATC sees all the different NICs and all the different all the cluster nodes, and again, you assign this NIC's going to be storage, this NIC's going to be compute, and it just handles all of that config for you. Which, uh, to be honest, that takes one of the tasks of cluster deployment that takes the longest and just does it for us, right? So I think it's a nice quality of life fix there. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Eric?
I have not personally used it yet. I've seen all the docs, read all through it. I have some curiosities. So let's bring something back to the forefront. It does require a cluster. This is not for standalone hosts. And so one of the prerequisites is going to be if you don't have failover clustering installed, you can't add the network ATC feature. So there's that. And then the other part is, so if I don't have the network configured yet, how is it reaching out across the cluster? What's going on? I want to see this thing in action. I really do. Um, sure, it's not a big deal. Just have a lot of questions, because I usually do. What I really like is after you have it, you can then go forth and change your ATC deployment just with one PowerShell command. This is what I want my new ATC layout to be, and it goes and makes it happen, makes it so across the cluster. So that's really slick, really slick. Of course, I have long since automated the entire process. So I have my own uh,
PowerShell scripts.
under the gun ATC, which is probably not nearly this good. So I'm a little jealous, but that's all right. That's all right. If we can actually make this process easier for folks, I'm here for it. Let's do that. So
For sure. For sure. One of the other new networking enhancements before we move on to other items here is Network HUD, HUD, as in David, Network HUD. And this one is, in the blog post, it states coming soon. So I don't think there's a ton of information out here on Network HUD yet. But, and I'm going to quote the article again here, Network HUD excels by analyzing real-time data from event logs, performance counters, tools like PacketMon, network traffic, and physical devices to identify issues before they happen. And so it sounds like Network HUD is going to be like a proactive fix it before it breaks type of utility. And the article even goes on to talk about how it's going to leverage capabilities in the physical switch to make sure that your config on the host node, cluster node, matches the physical network, right? So like, if storage has to be using a specific VLAN, it will be able to find that out. So somehow HUD is talking to the physical switches in the environment, right? So that's one question I have around this feature yet is what is it using to facilitate that communication?
yeah, is
And
it
so,
gonna I would like to see it. So I did talk to one of I'm not sure what he does. I talked to a fella at Microsoft about these two features. So HUD here derives from the aircraft lingo, the heads up display.
oh, right.
So that's what we're talking about. So if you've ever seen mock-ups, I was kind of when I was a little kid, I really wanted to be a fighter pilot, and then I found out I was too blind and too tall to do it. But that was after I'd already kind of immersed myself, and so I'd seen they have the cockpit, and then it projects like objects onto the cockpit, so they don't have to look. They see it right there. So that's where this comes from. Is basically your head is up instead of down at the instruments. It's up, looking at the screen, and there's all your stuff, all your readouts, all your information. That's where this is coming from. And it wants to show you and the data coming on and coming back to. So what I wonder is hopefully we all don't gloss over the terminology. Hyper-V virtual switch is a switch. It's virtual. It's not physical, but it is a switch.
Still a
And we
switch.
know that switches have a lot of abilities to communicate with each other. I mean, at the most basic level, they'll share ARP tables, so they can, this is the ARPs that I know about, or sorry, this is the ARP addresses I know about. And they'll share that information. So I assume as we get into this, it's basically, it makes it a smarter switch than it was to start with. Nice. That would be my guess for how it's figuring out what's going on the network. And it
Yeah.
may
So
go
that'll
so
be a nice,
far. Sorry,
yeah.
I was thinking about like one thing that we do a lot is if you use, I am completely blanking out here, a port channel with a switch, but there's special packets they use to tell if the line is up between switches.
Yeah. It's like an ether channel thing.
Yes, I had to talk people into not using it because they stopped when the new Hyper-V virtual switch mode, the switch embedded teaming doesn't support it. So I had to tell everybody to
Yeah. And
stop using it.
there's only one time I can think of in my career that I have actually used that type of deployment and have moved away from it after that. It was a cluster we had inherited. Excuse me. and it was, I don't know, it was like on a weekend. And of course I was on call. So it was
Oh
like a
no.
weekend, like a Saturday night, well, technically a Sunday morning at like 2 a.m. Somebody had made a change in the data center. They had removed a line out of a bonded Ethernet channel, and it just broke the whole thing, right? And so, that's why I tended to not like that type of deployment. It'd be fine in an environment where, it's a very small team making changes to the environment and the network's not very complicated. But this was a large data center with, multiple companies had colo, servers hosted in there, and it was people were coming and going all the time. It just too much chaos, in my opinion, for that
Yeah,
type of
and
deployment.
folks who do stuff like that, that's how we now the rest of us have to deal with ITIL and big let's all get together and talk about the changes we're gonna make next week, and then are we gonna approve that
Change
change or not?
management.
And
What's that?
oh, it's absolutely necessary and because of people who like, oh, click.
Yup.
So now I get to sit in meetings all the time of, are you planning any changes? I don't know. I just you want me to plan 5 days into the future? Why?
uh
Even though I know why, don't you don't have to answer that question, but why?
no, I think every sysadmin that has gone through a change management process is probably asking themselves the why question as well. So,
Yes, and we all know perfectly well why we're doing it. It's just like it's just I feel like I'm being punished because somebody else messed up. And
those of you
then
listening, if you have a fun change management story, I would love to hear it. Again, contact at sysadminweekly.com. Something I can share on the show. There's always those really interesting change management situations, right? Anyway, sorry, continue, Eric.
no, you're fine. All right, yeah, I think it's gonna bother me until I can think of that port channel tech, though. I'm really upset that I have forgotten. It's super basic.
But
It's
you'll
it's
think of it
it's
5 minutes from now.
so
So
there's LACP, LACP. That's what I'm trying to think of. And it sends the LACP to use. Is this line open? Is this line open? Is this line open? And then if it doesn't get that response, like, guess that line's gone, stops talking. Or somebody goes on their side, you know what? This was like, so it's a 4 bonded channel. And on switch side, I'm just going to take this one out. The other side goes, oh, I see that. I'll take mine out too. In theory, that's what happens. In reality, it's usually what you just said is somebody gets flying into the data center. Why is nothing working?
everything
Usually what happens.
breaks. Yep.
Black P never seemed to me to really deliver on his promises all that well, but so I was curious, like, are they gonna reintroduce that here? I bet not. I bet not. Hyper-V
I'm
no
sure it'll be
longer.
something similar though, I would imagine. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in how HUD is going to work under the hood. And I get the feeling we'll be doing a whole episode specifically about the inner workings of HUD when we get there. So anyway, um we've got a couple 3, 4 more items to talk about here. This next one's going to be really quick. Um Hyper-V manager enhancements. And there's one to talk about here. So, well, two items to talk about here. One, generation 2 is set as the default option for new virtual machines. So, if you're not familiar with Hyper-V, there's this concept of virtual machine generation. And generation 1 has more like emulated type virtual hardware, and generation 2 is more modern, truly virtualized virtual hardware components, right? And there's another a whole subset of different features and stuff that work with generation 2 that don't work with generation 1, et cetera, right? And Gen 2 has been around since 2012, I want to say. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric.
Sounds right. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but and it has not been the default up until now. So they apparently feel comfortable enough with it now being the new default. You can of course still select generation 1 if you need it for some weird reason. I haven't had to select a Gen 1 virtual machine for a very long time. But the option's there. And additionally, there's a new default CPU count. So when you spin up a new virtual machine in Hyper-V Manager, used to be it just selected a virtual CPU count of 1. Now, I think you said, Eric, now it selects whatever the maximum is, right? Which is odd to me. Um, and I have some thoughts around this, and we could probably have a whole episode just on this, but I have to wonder if the thought here is like, okay, configure the VM with as many CPUs as it can, and then just have the Hyper-V CPU scheduler sort it all out on the back end, which I could see that working, but I think you and I are of like minds on this. I'm always gonna set the CPU count to 1 or 2.
Mhm.
Um, Very rarely have I ever had to exceed 2 virtual CPUs. I can
Right.
think of a SQL box or 2 in the past where I've had to configure 4, but that was about it.
Yeah. I default to 2, and then if you want more, you have to show me the performance traces.
Show me the logs.
Show me the
Show me the
logs.
logs.
Yep.
We're gonna have to get T-shirts made up. SysAdmin Weekly. Show me the logs or something like that.
All right.
There's an idea there. Anyway,
Or the quote I had for long: if no performance traces, it didn't happen.
right? Very true. The next item we have on our list is in the realm of security. And it's probably one of those features that most people are going to gloss over. And it's going to be enabled where it needs to be enabled by default. And most people are going to look at it. And that is hypervisor enforced paging translation. And so basically what this is, it builds on top of some existing code security that Microsoft has baked into the Hyper-V stack. And it's basically used to defend against things like memory related memory related attacks like buffer overflows or write what where attacks, right? Explaining and going through exactly how those types of attacks work is probably outside the scope of this episode, but you can certainly go and do a Google search and find out how those work. But basically, they all kind of stem around the concept of manipulating code in memory and getting the system to compute code that it's not supposed to, right? Is essentially how that works out. And so hypervisor enforced paging translation is an additional guard against those types of attacks, essentially. So, nice security enhancement. It's going to be turned on by default. Most people probably aren't even going to know it's there, but it's there. Now, the next
Well,
one, in
good.
my opinion, is the big one, the big new feature for Hyper-V in Windows Server 2025, and that is GPU partitioning. Now, in the past, we've been able to allocate a physical GPU with a single VM, and it, will get that whole GPU. But now, just like we can carve off a portion of CPU or memory or storage and give it to a virtual machine, we can now carve off a portion of a GPU and allocate it to a VM, which is huge, absolutely huge. And this enables so many new use cases, in my opinion. So things that come off the top of my head are, I have a lot of experience in the manufacturing space from my MSP days. I can't tell you how many times I had CAD engineers or solid edge engineers, which is a CAD like program. You know, they had to have the super beefy workstation with their own dedicated GPU. Now, GPU-P potentially enables situations where um, you give an engineer a VDI desktop, and with GPU-P, they get a portion of a GPU, inside of a VM. And so it enables a lot of interesting use cases along those lines. I don't know. What do you think, Eric?
So you missed some of the fun parts. I think is we for the first time now have high availability with this, and you can live
Oh, yeah.
migrate a GPU-P virtual machine. No interrupt to the video. Ah,
Very true.
and
Before,
if
we didn't have you're absolutely right.
and if you were at Ignite, uh, AMD was there with a server brick they had sitting out on the show floor, running quiet, but it was running, and they had VDI
Very
sessions
quiet.
going with GPU-P, and the fellow there. So it was a Lenovo model if memory serves. And the fellow there said, "This here, if you go out to Azure right now and you hit the drop down and pick this particular virtual machine. It's running on this box right here, this one that you're looking at. And like, that is amazing. And they were RDP'd in and running, I forget what they're called, but like the graphics,
Benchmarking
benchmarking.
applications.
Thank you. Yep. Just running and the server sitting there quiet, humming, but GPU-P in place, all the stuff going. I'm like, this is amazing. And they're like, yep, you can just live migrate that to another host. Doesn't interrupt.
Yep. And it's
Amazing.
imperceptible. Yep. Yeah, I was really impressed. Definitely.
So it's going to be big for VDI, and it's going to be big because AI workloads, a lot of them use GPUs. So you will now be able to have AI tasks running inside your virtual machines on Hyper-V, live migration enabled. I mean, yeah, it's an
Yep.
absolute game
And I
changer. We have
suspect
not seen what's going to happen with this yet.
for sure. And I suspect because I know GPU-P had been talked about, was in development for quite a long time. I suspect the AI angle was the thing that finally got it across the finish line, right? It's to enable those AI and those machine learning workloads
That could
inside of
very well
virtual
be.
machines on top
Yeah,
of Windows Server
Hyper-V was kind of
2025.
in limbo with
So,
they had the RD, something from the RDS stack. They were, what was that? Again, another technology that was
oh
just kind of
boy,
hanging out there, and we just kind of,
yeah, that's gonna
and
drive me crazy. I know what you're talking about. Didn't it start with an F, if I remember correctly? It was out there for a few years, and then it wasn't. Then it came back for a second, and then it was. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember
so
that.
that was really
Apparently, it was not
iffy.
around long enough for me to remember the name.
Well, no, it was there a really long time, and remote desktop services had it first. So it was there for quite a while, but I don't know. I don't think I personally ran into anybody who ever really used it so much. Oh no. And then they
Doing a
had
quick
a
Google search here
DDA,
because
but
that's
that
gonna drive
never.
me crazy.
Uh, well, you'll have to add
I
it to
know
the show notes
exactly what you're
later.
talking about. Yeah, because there. I remember configuring this once or twice, but I'm gonna think of it 5 minutes after we stop recording. But yeah, we'll update the show notes with that for sure. That's a good one to bring up, definitely. So
Anyway, the
anyway,
point being, yeah, they just
um,
had a real big hole on video in Hyper-V for a while. For a while, people were like, are they even trying to fill this gap? What's going on here? And then they came out swinging with GPU-P. This is good stuff. It
is that
does.
Remote FX?
Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly the one.
Remote
I knew it had.
FX. Yep.
I knew it had one of those buzz letters in there, and it was X, but but I kept trying to put it in the beginning, like Xbox and DirectX, and make it the X a bigger thing than it was. But yeah, Remote FX. That's exactly what it was.
Yep. Yep. So, so yeah, I'm excited about GPU-P. GPU partitioning fixes a lot of issues, enables a lot of use cases, and I'm definitely excited to start seeing people hosting AI workloads inside of virtual machines on top of Windows Server 2025. So that's going to be fun to see once that takes off. So, well, we've got one more to talk about, and that is dynamic processor compatibility. And to me, this is another like super awesome quality of life fix. So let's go back to the old days again here for a second. So when I would stand up a new cluster, best practice would say I needed to install each node would be identical to each other, right? Same CPU, same memory. I mean, that's best practice. But we know in the sysadmin world, it doesn't always work out that way, right? And so it's feasible that you ran into a situation where, okay, this node has a slightly different processor. This node has a different processor. And of course, different processors, especially when they, are very different based on age, they'll have different computing sets inside of them, different instruction sets, right? And so you run into a situation where maybe an older CPU, an older node doesn't have the same instruction set as a newer node. So you had to set the processor level of the cluster, and you always selected whatever level was of the oldest node in the cluster. And so that disabled those instruction sets on the newer nodes, which, it's kind of a pain to kind of go through that manual process. What dynamic processor compatibility does is it kind of takes care of that for. I shouldn't say kind of. It takes care of that case for us, right? So it actually monitors those instruction sets, the different processor levels across the nodes, and sets that feature accordingly, which is a big win in my opinion. Um, Eric, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. It just solves a huge headache, in my opinion.
Yeah, so you can see a lot of this, and I know I've written on this. I don't know where to tell you. You can find a utility like CPUZ, fire it up on any computer, and it'll show you the instruction sets that your processor supports. So if you take a Hyper-V virtual machine, turn on the old processor compatibility that we've always had booted up, you'll see it strips it down to like its barest minimums. So all those things are not the other instruction sets are not available, and that gives you the ability to migrate very cleanly. I think a lot of people got way too worried about that. For most of your server stuff, they don't use the advanced instruction sets anyway, so that just doesn't matter. For desktop stuff, yeah, desktop applications are much more likely. I would say security and encryption kind of brought some of the missing things to the forefront. Anyway, yeah, with the dynamic processor compatibility, play with that a little bit with CPU-Z or something. You can see the differences. One thing it's yeah, I don't know that I really have a whole lot. It's a cool thing, and it's something we have been asking for quite some time, and I'm glad to finally see it come about. Ready to see it in
Yep,
production.
that's pretty much where I'm at with it as well. Very much where I'm at with it too. It's like, okay, finally, we have it.
Yes, and with
So
I think the biggest thing is not so much that it does it for you; it's that you don't have to go all the way to the bottom anymore. Because in
correct. Yep, and
2022 and
that's
earlier,
the
it
big
was
thing.
on or off. Those were your options. Turn them all off or leave them all on. There's no in between. This now will step it up more appropriately. So that'll be nice. So then you're not, then okay, great. I lose my bleeding edge stuff or the ones that are, whatever. Because I've had cluster nodes that are the same generation, but like two stepping levels different. And that has been enough that I had to use compatibility mode. Like that's just obnoxious.
Yep,
I
it
bought
is
this one in
for sure.
December and I bought that one in September. So I have to turn on compatibility. I'm like, that's not okay. I don't like that. So this makes that go away.
And I'm going again back to my MSP days where again we ran our own data center and we had large virtualization clusters. And I mean, it was always annoying when a node would fail and we had to grab the spare server off the shelf to make sure we maintain that N+2 that we were contractually obligated to, right? Okay, now I have to worry about processor compatibility because the spare was slightly older than the rest of the nodes in the cluster, right? So it solves a lot of headaches, especially for hosters. So that'll be nice for the hosters out there. So anyway, well, Eric, I think that's what I've got on my list there, and we're about out of time anyway. So, anything you want to add before we wrap things up?
We'll add it into the next episode if I come
If you
up with
don't, that's
something.
fine too.
Yeah.
That's
We'll just
right. There
wait
we
for
go.
more.
So, all right. Well, that's right. There will be more, no doubt. Like I said, I definitely want to do an episode specifically on HUD, right? Network HUD, because I think that's going to be an interesting one because I want to see how that's working under the hood. That's going to be on my list of things to lab and tinker with here in the coming weeks and months. So anyway, with that, again, like I've mentioned multiple times in this show, if you have any questions, comments about the show or the content, contact at sysadminweekly.com. We'll land you in Eric and I's mailboxes. And again, like I mentioned, we are a Project Runspace podcast. Project Runspace can be You can find out more about that at projectrunspace.org. Project Runspace is a well, Eric, you always explain Project Runspace way better than I do. Give us the 30-second elevator pitch.
All right, the elevator pitch is we want to
Not to put you on the
enable.
spot or anything.
I think we may have a delay in audio here, but Project Runspace is intended to reach out to that next generation of systems administrators who may not have the ability to just jump into it the way that some other people had due to lack of resources. Whether it's you don't have your own computing you can play with, or you don't have access to instructional material or instructors, and you would like to get into sysadmin work, then that is Project Runspace, and it's what we intend to do for you.
For sure. Good organization. I'm excited about it. And like I said, the show is Project Runspace podcast. So be sure to check that out as well. Other than that, thanks for spending some time with us. Hope to see you again next week for another episode of the SysAdmin Weekly podcast. If you're interested in checking out additional content from us, be sure to check out either iTunes or YouTube, and the show notes have all the different places that you can consume the podcast. So hope to see you there, and hope you enjoy the show. So with that, hope to see you again next week. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you again next week for another episode. Have a good one.